Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal the death of Monica brought not only an irreplaceable loss to Port Charles but also unleashed a storm of conflict surrounding the inheritance she left behind. For decades, Monica had been the very heart and soul of the Courtroom family, a woman who carried the weight of the family name with resilience, dignity, and a quiet but undeniable strength. The Courtroom mansion was more than just a house to heir. It was the stage upon which countless family dramas unfolded, where love affairs ignited and ended, where arguments echoed through grand halls, and where secrets buried beneath years of silence still lingered in every corner. Monica knew that the mansion was not merely property, it was legacy. As her health declined and she began to prepare for the inevitable, she made sure her will reflected her deepest wishes. In a moment filled with reflection and sincerity, she entrusted the house to Jason, the son who had walked a difficult path from darkness to redemption, the one she believed could preserve the spirit of the Courtroom name and protect the home as both a sanctuary and a symbol of endurance. But Monica's peace of mind was betrayed almost immediately after her passing. Tracy, her cunning and ambitious sister-in-law, wasted no time in asserting herself. Known for her ruthless pursuit of power and her long-standing resentment toward Monica, particularly over Alan's decision to gift the mansion to Monica years earlier, Tracy moved with precision. She exploited a legal loophole buried within the inheritance documents, using her sharp wit and legal connections to maneuver the estate into her control. With cold calculation, she presented herself as the rightful heir, effectively overturning Monica's final wish. The announcement shook the Courtroom family to its core. Jason, who had always valued action over words, found himself stunned by the betrayal. He had no doubts about Monica's intentions. He knew she wanted him to have the house, not because of money or power but because she trusted him to safeguard the family's identity. Now that truth was being twisted into something unrecognizable by Tracy's insatiable greed. The revelation turned Port Charles into the backdrop of a family war. For the Courtooms, whose lives had always been steeped in conflict and rivalry, this battle over the mansion became the fiercest of them all. Jason stood at a crossroads, facing the choice of letting go of the house and everything it represented, or stepping into open confrontation with Tracy, a woman infamous for her ability to crush anyone who stood in her way. His presence in the family had often been unconventional, even distant, yet this fight was different. It was personal. It was about honoring Monica's legacy. As the struggle intensified, the family split into factions. Some stood firmly behind Jason, believing he was the rightful heir chosen by Monica's heart, while others sided with Tracy, convinced her experience, pragmatism, and iron will made her the stronger guardian of the Courtroom fortune. What complicated matters further was the emergence of a rumor that threatened to destabilize everything, whispers of a long-lost sister of Monica. A woman who might step forward with her own claim to the estate. If true, it would change the dynamics entirely. The potential arrival of a sibling previously unknown to Port Charles cast doubt on every assumption. Did Monica know of her? Could this woman carry a legitimate claim, or was she merely another piece in the dangerous game of inheritance and deceit? For Jason, it was a warning that the battlefield was expanding, that Tracy's schemes might not be the only threat he would have to confront. For Tracy, it was an opportunity, a chance to ally with a new player and further solidify her control. This struggle was not just about wealth or a building of stone and wood. It was about identity, loyalty, and truth. The Courtroom mansion stood as a monument to everything the family had endured and achieved, but now it risked becoming the very thing that destroyed them. Jason's fight against Tracy was not only for bricks and mortar but for Monica's memory, for the values she instilled, and for the belief that family could still mean something beyond greed and betrayal. The battle lines had been drawn, and Port Charles braced itself for a confrontation that promised to reveal long-buried secrets, fracture fragile alliances, and forever alter the future of the Courtroom dynasty. In the eyes of the people of Port Charles, Monica's death was more than the loss of a beloved matriarch. It became the spark that illuminated the deepest fractures within one of the most prominent families in town. What should have been a period of mourning, reflection, and remembrance quickly descended into scandal and division. The inheritance of the Courtroom mansion, an estate that had always stood as a physical and symbolic pillar of the family's strength, became the center of a bitter war. To outsiders, it looked like a dispute over wealth and property, but to those who had lived in the shadow of the Courtroom legacy, it was a battle over history, honor, and the survival of the family name. For decades, tensions had simmered under the polished surface of their lavish gatherings. Monica had tried to hold the family together through endless feuds, betrayals, and reconciliations, always insisting that the mansion serve as a place where even an angered family remained bound to one another. Yet with her passing, that bond was fractured. Tracy's brazen move to alter the will was not seen as a mere legal maneuver but as the culmination of decades of resentment. Her ambition, cloaked in pragmatism, tore open wounds that had never healed. To many in Port Charles, her actions were not simply about greed but about dominance, and need to assert herself over a house that had once been the symbol of Alan's devotion to Monica. In taking the mansion for herself, Tracy undermined not only Monica's final wish but also the fragile sense of unity the family had left. The betrayal reverberated beyond the Courtroom estate, echoing through the corridors of General Hospital itself, where Monica had spent her life healing others while quietly holding her family together. For those who loved her, seeing her legacy twisted in this way was nothing short of sacrilege. Jason's reluctant emergence as the defender of the mansion added yet another layer of poignancy to the unfolding drama. Known more for his stoic distance than for family politics, Jason had never been a man drawn to wealth or possessions. Yet here he was, thrust into a position where silence was no longer an option. He bore the weight of Monica's unspoken trust, the understanding that she believed he could protect not just the physical house but the intangible soul it represented. For Jason, this was about loyalty, about honoring the woman who had never stopped seeing him as her son despite his choices, his mistakes, and the walls he often built around himself. In stepping forward, he revealed a side of himself rarely seen, a man willing to fight not for power, but for love and memory. The battle over Monica's estate quickly grew into one of the most defining conflicts in General Hospital's long history. It was no longer a matter of who would hold the deed to a mansion but a question of whether the Courtroom family could withstand the corrosive effects of greed, betrayal, and suspicion. The community watched closely, knowing the Courtrooms had always been a reflection of larger truths in Port Charles, that power, money, and legacy often come at the expense of love and loyalty. Would the family find a way to rise above Tracy's ambition and preserve Monica's vision of unity, or would they collapse into chaos, proving that even the strongest dynasties could fall apart when self-interest triumphed over kinship? As the dust of grief settled and legal battles began, the future of the mansion and by extension the Courtroom balanced on a knife's edge. The house that had once represented resilience now risked becoming a tombstone for everything Monica had fought to preserve. The legacy of her life and her love for her family would either endure through Jason's determination to honor her wishes, or it would be consumed by the relentless hunger for control that had plagued the Courtrooms for generations. At this crossroads, Port Charles witnessed not just the unraveling of an inheritance, but the unraveling of a family's very soul. Jason knew with absolute clarity that silence in the face of Tracy's ruthless maneuver would be nothing less than a betrayal of Monica, and that was something he would never allow himself to commit. From the moment he learned that the will had been altered, Jason ceased to be the quiet son who operated from the shadows. He was thrust into the center of a storm, and willingly but unshakably, transformed into the public face of resistance against Tracy's power grab. His actions were not driven by greed or ambition but by loyalty, by the enduring love for Monica and the trust she had placed in him. Determined to honor her true wishes, Jason moved swiftly and decisively. He retained a team of lawyers to mount a legal battle, gathered testimony from those who had been close to Monica in her final months, and unearthed drafts of previous wills that bore her unmistakable handwriting and intent. Piece by piece, he began constructing a case that revealed not only Monica's desire for him to inherit the mansion but also the calculated steps Tracy had taken to manipulate and exploit the system for her own gain. As Jason delved deeper, he uncovered disturbing truths. Tracy had acted with shocking speed in the days following Monica's death, seizing the moment of grief and confusion to push her agenda through. Worse still, Jason discovered that she had enlisted allies outside the family layers, financiers, and even political figures whose influence gave her the leverage to silence opposition within the Courtroom circle. This revelation confirmed what Jason already feared. This was no longer a family dispute confined to the walls of the mansion, but a sprawling game of power where money, reputation, and control dictated every move. What began as a fight over Monica's last wish was evolving into a battle that could shake Port Charles itself. Tracy, however, was never one to back down, least of all when her pride and her image were at stake. Armed with decades of experience in both business and politics, she countered Jason's every move with her signature blend of cunning and bravado. She argued, both privately within the family and publicly in society circles, that she was the rightful guardian of the Courtroom legacy. She painted herself as the only one capable of preserving the family's standing among Port Charles' elite, dismissing Jason as an outsider Samin who had turned his back on the Courtrooms long ago, someone to detach to understand the responsibility that came with this state. But Tracy did not stop at rhetoric. With a cold precision, she launched a campaign of character assassination against Jason. Whispers spread through Port Charles, seated carefully in the right ears. Jason was exploiting Monica's death for personal gain. Jason was grasping for wealth he had never cared for before. Jason, the enforcer, the man tied to the criminal underworld, was the last person who should inherit a symbol of respectability like the Courtroom mansion. These rumors, amplified by Tracy's influence, quickly gained traction. Neighbors, acquaintances, even some of the staff who had served the family for years found themselves questioning the truth. Jason, who had never cared about public perception, now faced the added burden of being judged not only in court but in the court of public opinion. The city was divided. Some saw Jason as the rightful heir, a son honoring his mother's dying wish. Others, swayed by Tracy's narrative, believed he was overstepping, trying to claim something that had never truly been his. The mansion, once a private sanctuary, had become a spectacle, a lightning rod for scandal. And for Jason, every moment of hesitation meant giving Tracy more ground. He realized that this fight was no longer just about proving Monica's intent, it was about defending his own integrity, proving that he was not the man Tracy painted him to be. The trial soon transformed from a legal proceeding into a living chronicle of the Courtroom family itself, peeling back decades of hidden conflicts, buried alliances, and resentments too long ignored. Each session inside the courthouse carried the weight of spectacle, with the gallery packed by both family members and curious citizens of Port Charles, all of them hungry to see how the story would unfold. For many, it felt less like a battle over an estate and more like the unraveling of a dynasty that had long stood as one of the city's cornerstones. Every revelation, every testimony, seemed to confirm what people had long suspected, that beneath the gilded walls of the Courtroom mansion lay fault lines of betrayal, ambition, and mistrust waiting to crack wide open. Jason, though not a man accustomed to public trials of character, carried himself with the steady composure of someone who knew he was fighting for more than property. Each piece of evidence his legal team presented added flesh to the skeleton of Monica's true intentions. One particularly poignant moment came when a family friend, a retired doctor from General Hospital, took the stand to recount late-night conversations with Monica in her final months. She had spoken of Jason as her anchor, the one who, despite his distance from the family drama, remained unwavering in loyalty. Her words, spoken softly yet firmly in those late-night confidences, framed Jason not as an outsider but as the rightful guardian of the mansion. This testimony, combined with Monica's own handwritten letters and diary entries, became a powerful tide pushing back against Tracy's coldly constructed narrative. But Tracy was relentless. With a sharp intellect honed from years of corporate and political maneuvering, she introduced her own witness as financial advisors who spoke to her ability to manage the state. Society figures who lauded her as the face of the Courtroom name in elite circles, even former staff who suggested Jason lacked the discipline to handle the weight of such responsibility. She positioned herself as the pragmatic choice, painting Jason as a figure driven not by loyalty but by sudden opportunism. Every time Jason's lawyers scored a point, Tracy's team retaliated with equal force, making the courtroom feel like a chessboard where each move had been calculated far in advance. The tension reached a fever pitch when the mysterious woman claiming to be Monica's long-lost sister made her formal entrance into the case. She was not content to linger in the background. She demanded recognition, asserting her rights with documents that bore the unmistakable marks of legitimacy. A birth certificate, faded but intact, listed her as the child of the same parents Monica had once spoken of. Adoption papers detailed her separation from the family decades earlier, a secret never mentioned but impossible to dismiss. The courtroom gasped as she declared that she too was an heir, and that Monica's death had reopened doors long closed. Her words carried an undercurrent of bitterness, as if she had waited her entire life for the opportunity to reclaim what she felt was stolen from her. Her arrival threw everything into chaos. The judge ordered delays while experts authenticated her documents, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty that both fueled gossip in Port Charles and emboldened Tracy. For Tracy, the woman was a gift, proof that Jason's claim was fragile, proof that bloodline and legacy were more complicated than Jason's defenders wanted to admit. She welcomed the woman into her camp, offering subtle assurances of partnership, of shared inheritance, and of the promise that together they could restore the Courtroom estate in a way Jason never could. Jason, however, saw the looming danger. The woman's claim was not just a threat to his case, it risked turning Monica's final wish into an afterthought, erased by the complexities of long-hidden family ties. As days turned into weeks, the trial revealed more than anyone could have expected. Handwriting experts pored over Monica's journals, confirming their authenticity. Legal scholars debated the weight of oral testimony versus notarized documents. Even figures from Jason's own past were called forward, some testifying to his loyalty and integrity, others dredging up the shadows of his life with the Corinthos organization, painting him as someone who lived outside the law. For every person who spoke of Jason's strength, another questioned whether a man with blood on his hands could ever be the true guardian of Monica's legacy. The city itself became divided. At Kelly's diner, conversations erupted daily, with patrons taking sides, some swearing Jason was the only one who could honor Monica's heart. Others convinced Tracy's experience made her the rightful heir. At General Hospital, where Monica had devoted her life, staff whispered about the trial with the same intensity as they did patient cases. Even the mansion itself, standing silently at the center of the storm, became a symbol of the larger question: could the Courtroom family survive its own hunger for power? Or was this trial the prelude to its collapse? By the time the supposed sisters' documents came back as legitimate, the trial had shifted from inheritance law into the territory of identity itself. If she truly was Monica's blood, her claim could not be ignored. The judge announced a new phase of deliberations, one that would weigh not only Monica's intent but also the rights of her sibling. Jason felt the ground shifting beneath him. Tracy sensed victory within her grasp. Yet beneath the surface, whispers began to circulate that the sisters' sudden arrival was too perfectly timed, too neatly aligned with Tracy's agenda. Investigators dug deeper, and quiet rumors hinted that the woman's past might conceal more than she admitted. That her alliance with Tracy was built not on family connection but on ambition and desperation. The trial had become more than anyone had expected, a reckoning for the Courtrooms, a mirror held up to Port Charles itself, and a stage upon which the memory of Monica was tested against the greed, ambition, and secrets of those she left behind. Each revelation seemed to tear away another layer of the family's carefully constructed image, leaving Jason to wonder not only whether he could win the mansion but whether he could preserve the meaning of Monica's life amid the wreckage of her death. The trial that began as a bitter inheritance dispute had by now evolved into something that transcended legal arguments and estate documents. It had become a living autopsy of the Courtroom family itself. Every hearing dug deeper into the skeletons buried across decades, pulling Ellen, Monica, and Tracy's tangled histories back into the present with a force that none of them, living or dead, could control. What shocked Port Charles most was how personal the courtroom felt, as if each exhibit entered into evidence was not a piece of paper or a letter but a dagger pulled from the family's own heart. The mansion, once the proud centerpiece of Courtroom wealth and influence, was now described in testimony as both a cradle and a battlefield, a place that had nurtured love but also bred envy, suspicion, and unrelenting ambition. Jason became the reluctant but undeniable focal point of the trial. For years he had kept himself at a distance from Courtroom politics, preferring the simplicity of loyalty to those he chose to protect over the constant manipulation of his blood relatives. Yet here, in the courtroom's suffocating light, he was forced to embrace his heritage. The letters from Monica that declared her unwavering belief in him were read aloud, transforming Jason from the shadowed son to the chosen heir in the eyes of many. Witness after witness, from doctors at General Hospital to old friends of the family, spoke of Monica's respect for Jason's integrity. Her conviction that he alone could safeguard the house not as a trophy but as a living testament to her life's work. These words breathed life into Jason's case, and for once, he allowed himself to carry the mantle of being Monica's son not in silence but in defiance. Tracy, however, was formidable. She refused to allow sentiment to outweigh strategy. Every time Jason's lawyers presented Monica's letters or diaries, Tracy struck back with notarized documents, financial records, and testimony from long-serving staff who painted Jason as a man too detached, too dangerous, and too immersed in a world of violence to be entrusted with the family's heart. She reminded the court, and the city watching beyond its walls, that Jason had once rejected the Courtroom name and all it stood for. And she insisted that his sudden interest in the mansion was opportunism, not loyalty. In moments of icy clarity, she told the judge that she had spent her life protecting the Courtroom reputation in elite society, while Jason had spent his eroding it with every headline tying him to Port Charles' criminal underworld. Her words cut deep, not only for Jason but for the community that could not ignore the truth in her accusations. As if the conflict between Jason and Tracy were not enough, the mysterious arrival of the woman claiming to be Monica's lost sister complicated everything. When her documents were authenticated, the trial shifted into an even more chaotic stage. For the first time, the judge acknowledged that the validity of Monica's will might be fundamentally altered by the presence of a new heir. This woman's testimony was a mixture of sorrow and bitterness. She claimed she had grown up in obscurity, always aware of a family she could never reach, and now that Monica was gone, she refused to be silenced any longer. Some were moved by her story, seeing in her a tragic figure reclaiming her rightful place. Others whispered that her timing was too convenient, her alliance with Tracy too suspicious. Rumors spread through Port Charles that Tracy had orchestrated the woman's arrival, or at the very least discovered her existence and manipulated her into staking a claim. Private investigators began digging, lawyers demanded more records, and journalists flocked to the courthouse, turning every development into front-page news. It was no longer just a family matter. It had become a public reckoning that drew in allies and adversaries alike. Even those outside the Courtroom orbit began to pick sides, friends of Monica standing with Jason, old business partners aligning with Tracy, and opportunists hoping the woman's claim would fracture this state enough to benefit themselves. As the weeks dragged on, the trial's atmosphere grew heavier. The revelations about Alan's private disputes with Tracy, the reappearance of old contracts signed in secrecy, and Monica's haunting words in her diary all painted a picture of a family long poisoned by ambition. Jason realized that his battle was as much about perception as it was about law. He wasn't only defending Monica's will, he was defending himself from becoming the villain Tracy wanted the world to see. For the first time, he spoke openly about what Monica had meant to him, about how she had never turned away from him even when he turned away from her, about how her trust was the one thing that had never wavered in his turbulent life. His words were not grand speeches but plain truths, and in their simplicity lay a power that shook even those who doubted him. Tracy, however, continued to weave her web. She painted Jason's statements as manipulative attempts to hide his greed. She leaned heavily on her alliance with the supposed sister, reminding the court that bloodlines could not be ignored. Together, they argued that Jason's presence in the family had always been conditional, while theirs was absolute. The irony, admissible to the public, was that Tracy had spent decades undermining Monica, yet now stood shoulder to shoulder with Monica's alleged sister as if she were the family's savior. The hypocrisy was staggering, but Tracy's confidence and experience made it difficult to dismantle her case entirely. And so the trial reached a point where it was no longer about evidence alone but about endurance. Could Jason withstand the smear campaigns, the endless technicalities, the constant attacks on his character? Could Tracy maintain her composure as Jason's team steadily chipped away at her facade, exposing not only her greed but her fear of losing control? Could the mysterious sister maintain her credibility as whispers about her true motives grew louder with each passing day? The future of the Courtroom mansion hung in the balance, but so too did the very identity of the Courtroom family. The courtroom became the crucible where truth and lies collided, where love and betrayal were measured not in sentiment but in rulings and verdicts. And still, the city waited, watching with rapt attention, knowing that whatever decision was made would echo far beyond the mansion's walls. It would decide whether the Courtroom family survived or finally collapsed under the weight of its own history.